Doom 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 na 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 doom 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 doom. Money, you get away. You get a job with full pay and you're okay. Money, it's a gas. Grab that cash with both hands and make a stack. Okay, so yes, I may have had the idea of literally listening to Pink Floyd before this, so... Well, to be fair, I'm going to listen to that again anyway. You know what? For a 51-year-old album like Dark Side of the Moon, possibly the greatest album ever made. I'm not joking, by the way. So, moving swiftly along, Chris and money. We've got to have money. And by the way, I'll call a tow truck, but now I have less than $20 between the bank accounts and PayPal. Chris after his car broke down on the way home from BronyCon. He's not good at math when it comes to managing money. Bob Chandler understanding it, admitting it, and you gotta think how bad it must have been from the point of view of his poor dad to have to say that Bob his dad knows fine well that Chris doesn't get it about money. And I get the reason why, but I feel a little bit embarrassed the fact that they had to base the image of Philip J. Fry. Philip J. Fry was actually quite charming in his own way. Chris isn't, unfortunately, and his hair is nowhere near greasy enough. Chris has repeatedly shown through his actions and words that he has no idea how to handle money or manage his own finances. Between his impulse spending, his greed and selfishness, his unwillingness to save even the smallest amount of money from anything he makes, and his massive sense of entitlement, Chris manages to demonstrate complete incompetence and ineptitude in managing financial affairs. Chris has repeatedly amassed debt on credit cards, only to have his enabling parents bail him out multiple times, too lazy to work. He refuses to make or follow any type of budget or financial plan, instead spending far beyond his means and expecting others to pay for his accumulated debt for him. It is clear that Chris has no idea what financial responsibility is, and that his enabling delusional parents taught him nothing about how to handle finances while he was growing up. Irresponsible, careless, and thoughtless, Chris fails at just about every aspect of financial management that can be thought of. And I want to go into this by first exclaiming to you, ladies and gentlemen, that absolutely everything they've just mentioned in this entire opening, that's not an understatement. Chris has gone on Facebook before crying and saying whether or not anybody wants to pay off his $250,000 mortgage. This is following the events of when Chris hit Michael Snyder with his car, and Chris had to basically bleed his father's inheritance completely dry because of what they decided to do, because of Chris's own actions. Then, of course, there's the idea, the fact that Chris will make begging videos to accumulate the smallest amount, and then we'll spend it on... We'll go through, like, the begging videos, absolutely, because they are a marvel in themselves. In fact, to be honest, do you think it'd be a good idea if we actually went through that first? Or do you reckon we should actually save it for, like, somewhere later down the line? In fact, you know what? Let's do things a little bit differently. We're going to actually check out the begging videos first, and then it could showcase to you guys a bit better the sort of turbulency that Chris has when it comes to money. So, pardon me one moment. Okay, so I welcome all of you back because, as I mentioned before, I sort of actually want to do things a little bit differently, but actually talking about the excessive, like, where the depths truly began with Chris. And now, for some reason, it's not quite listed here, because I know fine well there was, like, some videos, actually, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and see if I can find, like, the first one, because not all the videos about Chris Chan begging for money. Because hopefully what I'm going to try and like establish is why all of this like makes sense. So there are like other videos as well that would talk about this, but for the sakes of like trying to just make what's like the first one as well? I don't know why they're bringing up like Gordon Ramsay and stuff like that. Okay, well, they might possibly. Oh, look, it's me. Oh yeah, I remember when I did that as well. Look at that, 3 years ago, 38 viewers. Holy shit, I was doing great back then. So, some of these. There is one like video for those who don't know what I'm talking about. It's the ending to part 49 where Chris is like in some sort of like blue, basically what he's wearing right here, begging for donations and deciding not to read comments because all of a sudden it finally occurred to Chris that there are. It's possible he might have just deleted some things, but there are other things that he didn't delete. And let's just go through these like one at a time, and you can see like how bad things get.
Hello, this is Christine Chandler coming to you live from home, and I definitely have a more urgent and special request. My mother really needs her medication for her asthma. That's right here. That's her right there, Barbara. Anyway, it's like $100. So we really need the money because we don't have $100. So yeah, just like I said earlier, you can send all donations directly to my email address via PayPal. Have a good day. Thanks.
Now, there are certain things that, again, I'm going to, like, pick upon, like, later on, and comments are turned off, probably because of, like, the amount of negative responses Chris got out of this. Also, it's probably in probably maybe some of Chris's interests at the fact that the dislike button was deleted because, oh boy, Chris's videos do not get, like, the best of responses. And by the way, there will be more to go over, but bear in mind, this is the level of work that Chris will actually put into whatever he's trying to do. This is, by the way, if you are bear this in mind, is that if you were paying Chris to do a video, this is for $50. This is what you would get, and well, watch this. It's 35 seconds for $50. Does not sound like good value, but well, I think I've talked about that before. But anyway.
Hello, Martin, over there in Australia. Sorry I'm a little bit late. I've been so busy with life changes and everything. But anyway, your friend paid for me to wish you a happy birthday. I hope you had a very nice and pleasant birthday. You are a special guy, Martin. Special guy to this birthday. Everybody wish you a happy birthday. We hope you had a safe and pleasant one. Anyway. Thank y'all for your support over there in Australia. Have a great and safe day.
So, Twitch is evolving. Yeah, right. Oh, look, it's the Maxwell video about Bloodborne. I like that. So, yeah, immediately. Now, to be honest, now listen, guys. I want to make this a point of a reference right now. Is that if somebody paid me $50 to do like a shout out video for something like Cameo or something like that, Chris, like, starts the video, like, rambling about things that he should obviously leave out, and then he starts rambling about things that absolutely you know that he should just straight up disregard. Because, well, the amount of effort that actually goes on to this is that it gets slightly worse because here's another video that Chris did that you paid money for him to do.
Hello, Jonathan. This is Christine Chandler wishing you a happy birthday.
In case you're wondering what that vibrating sound is, it's actually coming from Chris's bra, so that's good to know, eh?
At least I hope I have not missed your birthday. If I did, well, happy belated birthday. Hope you had a good day, or I hope you're having a good day. So, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, again, if Chris is, if you're, again, Chris should have rehearsed this. Chris, like, it's tantamount to how much Chris is like, this is again, ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly the sort of thing that actually, you know what, not being responsible, not caring about being responsible, this is the sort of thing that leads to situations like this, where you have to resort on literally, begging people to actually buy your services, or just straight up giving you money anyway. And I want to make this a point of reference, ladies and gentlemen, because I know some people might think this is mean, but Chris is not a charity. I'm going to say that right now. I've known some very, very good charities in my time. You know what? I even did a little bit of charity work for the Little Sisters of the Poor. And you know what? The work they do is like fantastic. It really, really is, because it's specifically for like people who like work for the elderly, and well, then again, giving Chris that idea might not be the best under the circumstances, but it's phenomenal that, you know what, when you do give to like it's not particularly uncommon for some charities to come back, well, at least the people that you're doing the deeds for, to not look somewhat appreciative and thankful. And tell me, was there ever a point in all of this that Chris looked like he was grateful, or, you know, maybe I'm just missing a point? It look, with like everything else, it just seems like it's an obligation for Chris. Not that he has to feel anything, just as if he has to look like he cares.
Hey, I hope you're having a good day. So, I don't know, here you go, a happy singing song. I don't know, I just today. Whee, have fun. Happy birthday.
And even Chris like pulls away, thinking, "Thank God that's over." I'm not kidding, ladies and gentlemen. Chris has the attitude, the sort of attitude, not just when it comes to like money, but when it comes to like business as well, is that literally as soon as it's over, he never has to look back on those sorts of things again. And there's actually there is a bit more to this. Well, this is where it basically goes into hell. This also goes into hell. Trying to think if there's like much. I'm assuming there's going to be like we might probably cover a little bit more about this when the actual fight, when we talk about things like debt and stuff like that. But yeah, as well, there's just more. And by the way, well, actually, there was one more thing I did kind of want to look at, and it's probably this, where basically what happens is that Chris just sort of completely gives up and just begs and just does dumb stuff and literally just whinges and whines like an absolute baby, when, you know what, Chris 100% brought this upon himself, and that's before things get even worse later on. So there are going to be like, there's a lot more to this, I will say. I mean, we'll cover this in like greater details with better things regarding the financial crisis, but the things I kind of want people to understand just before we like move on from this is that Chris, at least in the modern day, views money as something that is just almost like a barrier between what he needs, wants, and that's all he can really think about. And it gets slightly more insidious like the further we go down this, because as you'll see through other videos we'll get to, all Chris really seems to care about is that, well, just everybody tends to his needs, and that Chris doesn't actually have to give anything back. Chris, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, as Chris basically stares into your soul on this one, is that I've written, like, actually, I'll tell you what, I'll talk about it in the end. I think you might be interested in hearing it. Okay, so now we are back, and as you can see, well, let's just get into this one step at a time. But wait, Chris isn't employed. For the vast majority of Chris's adult life, his only source of income has been his monthly tugboat that he receives from the US federal government every month. In 2009, the payout was $809 a month, placing his annual income at $9,708. After Bob's death, Chris was given a survivor's benefit. well, considering that the idea goes is that Chris only survives is morbid but not too far from the truth, increasing the amount to $1,300 per month and making his annual income $15,600. Bob's income from Social Security and a pension is around $1,200 per month or $14,400 per year. Considering Bob has worked and Chris has basically spent less than 6 months of his entire life in an actual paid job, you might say that's not too bad. Although, I will say to people who immediately say, well, Chris is basically just getting money for nothing, I should also make it a point, ladies and gentlemen, because the idea of like benefits and welfare checks, these are the sorts of things that go back and forth between many people, is that if it was really as simple as this, then why aren't we all going unemployed then? It's not quite as simple as that. Chris's parents originally took $450 to pay for room and board. This payment was later increased to $565 and then to $580 after Bob paid off Chris's enormous credit card debt. Well, you have to wonder again what a fantastic dad Bob Chandler was a fantastic dad that he could have possibly have been with Chris. Not everything he did was perfect. Let's get that straight. But you did get the impression that Bob wanted to make sure that his son was going to be okay, which is, I like that. The rest of the tugboat generally went towards video games, junk food, or other frivolous purchases. However, $229 per month, around $750 a day, was and is nowhere near enough to satisfy Chris's need for electronic entertainments, PlayStation Network downloads, a constant supply of chicken nuggets, gallons of Coke, and since the summer of 2009, alcohol. As of January 2010, he owed roughly $3,500 in credit card debt, some on cards of his own and some on cards he stole from his parents. And that's the level of thanks Chris actually gives back to his parents, by the way. He will steal from his own parents. If I stole from my parents, I'd literally be out on the streets. That's not even up for debate. Indeed, according to one of his bank statements, at the end of 1 month he had fewer than $3 left in his account. Even more, just by straight up spending and no other extra income, he put himself $452.57 in the red. How much he got to keep later on isn't known. My father helped me get my Social Security set up. I get a month I get more a month than I could at a job. That's a lie. There are no matter where you go in this world, you can always get more from like a 9 to 5 job than you ever will if you're just on welfare. And that's even if you just do part-time at like 20 hours a week. There's no way Chris's claims about economics should be taken as gospel because, well, let's face it, taking advice from Chris is not the smart thing to do. Yet with my impulsive shoppiness, mostly controllable, well, that's very doubtful, although we'll move on, I end up spending my side money after I get it. Chris completely deluded and taking pride in being a lazy bastard as much as possible. Now, I know fine well what probably some of you are going to be saying. You know what? Money is sometimes, it is pretty quick to, like, lose track on what you do. But you know what? This is the first step in financial responsibility, ladies and gentlemen. Rule number 1, find out how much you actually have. That is rule number 1 of financing your finances. Rule number 2 of managing your finances. Work out exactly what you are spending your money on in just one day. That will give you something of a root cause as to how much can go in 2 days, in 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, a week, 2 weeks, a month, a year. I mean, listen, even those who are relatively comfortable are actually very, very economical because you know what? They will take great pains to make sure that they don't run out of money because they will actually save money for, to go on holiday 1 year or to do something different. It's only because maybe through the unfortunate nature of the fact that Chris is unemployed, And the fact that Chris is completely not economical is why his impulsiveness is so high when it comes to spending. If Chris was economical, he would finally see the error of his ways, and he will see his things in a more dystopian light. Like, he will be looking at his video games and thinking to himself, how many of those has he actually played, or rather, how much of his own money has he spent on things that are not necessarily necessary whatsoever. And besides, I haven't bought a new release of like a video game for like close to 15 years. And to be completely honest, ladies and gentlemen, video game playing is like something that is only it's just, I suppose the problem is as well is that because I keep myself busy, because A, I have a job, B, when I'm not at my job, I come and, do these sorts of videos and we talk about Chris and I do like all sorts of other things, is that actually being productive and actually finding out ways in which you can improve your social status, these things are more productive. And to those who are saying that video game playing is not productive, it's productive for those who make their living and being entertaining by doing things like Twitch streaming, even those who review video games. But for reasons we'll get into, that might be too much for what it's worth for Chris, especially because Chris is the sort of person where he relies more on instant gratification rather than gradual support. So let's keep going. Chris and impulsive spending. It's obvious that Chris has no grasp on the real value of money. Rule number 3, ladies and gentlemen, you're gonna realize very quickly is that if you don't value money, then you're not going to be having it for very long. Since he actively wastes as much of his monthly tugboat as possible on frivolous frivolities like trading cards, sex toys, pornography, video games, alcohol, makeup, toys, prostitutes, and weekly lottery tickets. Chris is a self-admitted impulsive buyer. His PlayStation Network account shows he's never played more than half of the games he's bought, and yet astoundingly, he'd still gone out of his way to buy all available downloaded content for every single PlayStation 3 game that he's ever purchased. Which, again, that's like rule number 4, ladies and gentlemen. If you're going to buy something, use it. Don't just allow it to collect dust, because you know what, you could get a twig from outside and literally put that in your room and let it collect dust, and its functionality would have still been the same. He's still he doesn't know he's ever purchased, and even for games he doesn't own, Chris's logics are all screwed up. Yeah, and he also further promoted his Sony fanboyism by later buying a Sony LCD HD television for his bedroom, which likely cost around about $1,000 to $1,500. All the while, Chris bought his clothes at second-hand discount thrift stores. Usually children are taught the true value of money at a very young age, not in Chris's case apparently. In September of 2013, Chris complained about he and his mom going through emotionally depressing and financial downfall to the depths of greater poor and just getting by, making it clear that the family income dipped after Bob's passing. However, the supposedly lean times were apparently not enough to motivate Chris to get a job, or even to stop buying games, as evidenced by him racking up over $1,000 in game purchases on the Simpsons game Tapped Out. Chris spent $1,000 on Tapped Out? Sorry, I've just got such a pain in the neck, but goodness me, this is going to give me a headache as well. $1,000. What on earth did he? What? Rule number 5, ladies and gentlemen, of financial responsibility. Enjoy it while you can, ladies and gentlemen. And I suggest you enjoy it. And you may feel that you are on top of the world enjoying what you do with your money, but nobody stays on top forever. And if somehow your outlook doesn't even change when reality strikes you in the head, then once again, what were people thinking giving you money in the first place? You could basically shorten that down to be responsible, be grateful for what you get, is what I should say. Throughout the summer of 2014, Chris continued to spend thousands of dollars on Lego and other frivolities. Yes, I like the word frivolities, screw that. All while whining and complaining on Facebook about the family's poor finances. Chris financed this spending primarily with money from selling custom arts and crafts on his eBay account. Even his Facebook friend, was it either Kenneth Engelhardt or William Elliott Waterman, actually called Chris out on this by saying that, don't you realize what you're doing is like stupid and wrong? Offering free shipping to customers. Chris would receive money from customers and then pay for shipping out of his own pocket. Not a very good solution. However, Chris would immediately spend money as soon as it was deposited into his account, often leaving him unable to ship products to customers who had already paid him because of his own financial irresponsibility and negligence. Why Chris literally... Again, all that mattered to Chris was just getting some money how he could, but for him not to make any other changes whatsoever. Rule number 6, ladies and gentlemen, of financial responsibility. You can't have your cake and eat it. You can't expect for you to be given money through a service and then for you to carry on exactly as you did before, because it's proved that you own what all you care about is making sure your own satisfactory wants as over needs is prioritized. But once again, because Chris is completely uneconomical. No, that's not right. Economical. No, that's not right either. It's because Chris is not because he doesn't know how to finance his life, let alone his money. He will prioritize his wants over his needs every single time. Now, and again, it's why we say you can't have your cake and eat it, because, well, why do you reckon you're being given cake for in the first place, Chris? Think about what exactly you've done to earn that cake. Throughout the summer of 2014, $1,000 offering free shipping, who had already paid. Okay, so sorry, we've just done that. With several of Chris's eBay customers filed complaints against him because Chris failed to ship an order as promised and obligated. Chris responded by harassing and trolling the customers, posting their personal information in a public post on his Facebook account. Rule number 7, ladies and gentlemen, of financial responsibility. When people order stuff from you, you do your bit to make sure it is delivered to them. That's the least you could do, Chris. It only makes sense. And that's, again, rule 7. It only makes sense to do things that will make you look good. And if that means, you know what, you don't have to play like the Lego video game movie, whatever it is, but during this time, if it means you don't have to play that for an hour, that's probably a good trade-off. In light of this, you would think most prospective future customers probably wouldn't want to risk being harassed or scammed by Chris. Unfortunately, many more still purchase from Chris on a daily basis. Mostly weens who just want to be like remembered in Chris Tree for stuff like this. That's the only reason they do it. I think so. All the while, even as Chris's credit card debt continued to spiral out of control, Chris continued to buy thousands of dollars of video games, Lego, and other frivolities. As if this were not bad enough, just days after putting his and Bob's cars up for sale at extortionate prices, Chris went out and bought a 2010 Ford Focus, stating on Facebook that he had been approved for a loan, probably at a high interest rate. He also stated that paying for insurance for his new car was killing him. You know, the thing that every single driver has to have in order to actually drive a car anywhere in the world. Implying that either the insurance payment was costly, but he was having trouble paying for it. Or both. Rule number 8, ladies and gentlemen, of financial responsibility. Don't buy something you can't afford. Simple as that. In January of 2015, it was leaked that Chris had spent an absurd amount of money on Nintendo consoles and games, racking up 585 transactions in the last 4.5 years. A list which includes useless shovelware, hordes of first-party Nintendo software, virtual console games, and both versions of a game he doesn't even like. 276 of these purchases are known to be handheld games, 8 of which are known to be video game consoles, buying 4 DSs and DSIs. Why he needs as many as 4, I don't quite understand. Because, well, maybe Chris was trying to, trade Pokemon with himself so we could actually evolve them and get them to the highest levels in the game. Or something. And 75 which are known to be console games. The grand total cost of all of Chris's listed purchases is $7,460.43, or $1,657.87 per year. Please keep in mind that 39% of purchases Chris has on his account are not yet specified, meaning that their cost is not included in this already insanely high number. This information comes on the heels of Chris begging people for money to fix his mother's cavities, as well as the financial worries that his trials will undoubtedly cause. Now, if somebody had ever pointed this out to Chris, that, you know what, maybe when you present it in this light, and this is the sort of money that could get you out of some very serious trouble, Chris might have possibly have looked at money in a slightly different way, or looked at his addiction in a different way. I would say Chris has an addiction to video games, but reading through this, you could almost honestly say Chris has an addiction for just throwing money away. He is, yeah. I would have argued that if Chris was just going to give money away, he may as well give it to charity, because I think Nintendo and Sony will get on just fine without Chris's contributions. You never know. In July 2016, a field agent provided the following account of Chris in a painfully awkward situation where he did not have enough cash to pay for his junk food at a gas station. My friend walks into a gas station / convenience store on the northern edge of Charlottesville. Chris is trying to buy a $7 or so of junk food type stuff, but he only has $5 in cash. The cashier tries to make him understand that he owes $2 more. Chris seems to understand, but is slow to process what to do about it. My friend, who is second in line, picks out 2 $1 notes and says, "Here you go," and puts them on the counter. Chris, it seems, more out of stupidity and confusion than malice, picks up the $2 and his purchases and makes to leave. So Chris was willing to steal somebody's money and still steal from a store that he has yet to fully pay back the recipient from. This is why, that's a perfect metaphor for Chris's attitude towards money. He thinks that he can get away with something and he can continue, and he will be quids in no matter what he does. So why bother trying whatsoever? My friend and the cashier both object and yell that he has to leave the $2 with the cashier. Chris doesn't seem to react. A dude who is behind both of them in line is between Chris and the door. As Chris passes him, he taps him to get his attention and says something like, "Hey buddy." Chris makes a get away from me hand-wavy gesture without looking at any of the 3 of them, and fairly loud says, "It's miss," and hurries out the door. Chris continues to his car in a half-run, half-walk, as all 3 of the people in the store watch confused and amazed. Chris pulls out of the parking spot, but for some reason heads towards the back of the lot, where there is no exit. As Chris gets to the back of the lot, he stops, backs up a few feet, tries to turn the car around, doesn't make it, backs up again, and finally gets around, essentially making a 5-point turn in a fairly largely empty parking lot. Chris drives past the store again, not looking inside, and finally drives off. One dreads to imagine how his financial incompetence will affect him once Barb is dead. Or if, if we don't even need to get to that point. Knowing Chris, and while it is quite tragic, he'll probably continue in his destructive spending patterns until he loses everything he has, and even then, he'll learn nothing. Sad but true. Chris's parental enabling. Bob encouraged his son to remain unemployed. Okay, you remember what I was talking about like at least 20 minutes ago about how Bob really did care? Well, I think at heart he probably still did, but like, what parent would like encourage that? I'm not saying, was it just for the sake? I don't understand. I probably won't ever understand that, but since he believed that Chris would earn more money from his monthly tugboat than he would from ever getting a job. However, this assumption was and is inaccurate. Minimum wage in the state of Virginia is $7.25 an hour. If Chris were to somehow do a complete 180 on his life, he would never will, and begin working a full 40-hour week, his monthly payment before taxes and payment for room and board would be around $1,260. That's $15,100 annually. Subtracting the money he pays his mom every month to live, as well as the 5% tax on his income range as mandates in the state of Virginia, Chris could very likely be left with a ridiculous $8,000, which, knowing Chris, would be spent on yet more frivolities. Contrast this with the $2,748 Chris pulled in annually from the government after paying off his parents, and it becomes clear that Bob's encouragement came from either thinking Chris would lose his Social Security payments if employed, which he wouldn't, or the more accurate notion that his son is a useless failure. Wow. A very likely explanation for Chris's recklessness spending is that his parents are at fault, to a degree at least. In addition to coddling him throughout his entire life, they managed to make sure that Chris has never felt the repercussions for his exorbitant spending, or for anything else for that matter, but we'll get into that later. By taking over paying Chris's credit card debt, regularly giving him about $6 a day for small things, buying him fast food on a daily basis, and continuing to let himself blow all of his money in frivolities and useless stuff, as opposed to essentials like hygiene products, courses that could eventually help him onto the employment ladder, or clothing that isn't unbelievably tacky, whenever Chris manages to get himself into trouble, he knows that Bob will come running to his aid and defend him, and dig him out of whatever mess he's managed to get himself into, even if it is clear that he is in the wrong. This enabling is the most likely explanation, in addition to his poor impulsive control, for why Chris spends himself into debt as much as he does. Fan funding. I love this meme so much. It's fantastically stupid, but I love it. Horrified onlookers, people with jobs, Chris explaining his economic theories. Chris believes that by receiving and spending his tugboat on useless junk, he is aiding the economy. No, he isn't. And paying for other people's tugboats. Not even close to true either. This is a damningly moronic conviction. Since sales tax goes to the state government and those tugboats are paid with federal payroll tax, where Chris is hiding the printing press to afford this discretionary spending is unknown. Interestingly enough, well, it's not that discreet, we know how much he pays for video games. Interestingly enough, while he has no clue how to handle money, Chris has an unhealthy fixation on his material possessions. In Viviteg's AIM chat, he stated that he did not want to sell any of his stuff in the Miyamoto saga. He refused to sell anything to help raise money for the trip to Redmond, and Miyamoto is probably still waiting there to this very day. While Chris mocked Lars's habits of buying and collecting model boats and adorns for them, after learning about it from Jackie, he failed to realize that Lars's supposed habits were directly parodying his obsessive purchasing and hoarding of video games and DLCs, even for games that he did not and has never owned or played with. His mother has served as a bad influence regarding Chris's beliefs in material goods, as she would frequently shop at Goodwill and compulsively hoard the purchases, which both wasted money and helped turn their house into a fire hazard. On the 16th of May 2019, Chris tweeted a screenshot of an NBC story about how ex-EPA chief Scott Pruitt spent nearly $124,000 on excessive airfare. Chris then showed off his complex views on the US economy by saying the following. Hey everyone, here's a think piece. Firstly, if people didn't overspend so much, then there would be more money to give to charities around the world. And then that brought to mind that if things had not gone up in price, I know about inflation and that more money has been officially printed and distributed over the decades, there would be more to freely give to those unfortunate. Why, back in the day, we had to pay a nickel for a Hershey bar. A nickel. Now it's $1.50. We could be using that $1.45 to feed the hungry everywhere. But everyone got greedy for the green and didn't appreciate it as much as a nickel. Yep, Grandpa had done goofed up with the inflation and crap, sad face. Okay, that's... I suppose the only thing I could really say about this, just to sum this whole thing up, is the fact that rule number 10 of financial responsibility: don't talk about things you do not know, and don't get involved in things you do not know when it comes to money either, because through Chris's experience, he hasn't done anything to demonstrate he knows what the hell he is even talking about on complex issues such as economics. After the house fire. On the 10th of January 2014, 14 Branch Lane Court burned down. This would undoubtedly place the Chandlers in grim circumstances due to the cost of rebuilding the home and replacing what was lost. Some of his fans pooled their funds to send him a care package with a money order for $500. Oh, and by the way, in case you're wondering what Chris thought about this, he immediately wrote back to Noel complaining that the money order was not signed, even though money orders can be transferred without necessarily a signature from those who are sending it, because the bank would do that automatically. But the point was that Chris's first thing to do was to shriek, complain like a child, and not actually thank Noel or anyone who was actually willing to go out of their way to help the Chandlers out for something that was already Chris's fault. Many concerned about Chris due to his wasteful spending habits hoped that this would be the moment in Chris's life where he finally woke up and realized the importance of having a rainy day fund. Unfortunately, not even that has broken through Chris's fixed goal, and this is 10 years ago as well. Throughout 2014, he wasted $5,000 on Lego sets. What does an adult need $5,000 for Lego to do anyway? I have no idea. Bob's toxic influence. According to a troll with insider information, Chris was able to manage his own finances to a rudimentary degree, even after Bob passed away, although he still has an issue with not saving money for potential emergencies. The troll also asserted that Chris's financial hardships are caused in most part by Bob helping herself to Chris's monetary accounts in order to attempt paying her out of control debts. Now, in case you're wondering, yes, I do think this is a really shitty thing to do as well, but at the same time, Chris did it as well. But to be honest, I don't really care for either of them at this point, so that's that as well, I guess. Bob is the one who has serious debt. She fucks up Chris's budgeting by erratically taking money from Chris's account when she needs it, generally without warning. These are two types of Chris's begging videos. One in which Chris wants a bit for extra Legos. You can identify these videos by how vague Chris's requests are, as we showed earlier, and how relaxed Chris is in this video. Chris isn't in a meltdown mode in those videos. Now, the other type of video is when Bob tried to snatch some money from Chris, and Chris doesn't have anything for her. You can identify those videos as by how freaked out Chris looks. He's visibly distressed, and he's citing specific bills he's got to pay. Usually things that seem un-Chris-like. That's when Bob is freaking out at him for not having enough money to pay her debts. The thing is, the perception is that Chris is bad with money. He's not bad with money as far as monthly budgeting goes. Despite how foggy Chris's head is, he's got enough money to recognize patterns in bills over the course of a few months. He knows he's got to pay electricity bills and rent and things like that. That's obvious. You can't trust his begging. He begs because he wants more money, not because he's in any financial strains, that is, not including Bob. He lives cheaply as shit. He saves money by buying dollar store shit. He's the type of person to buy single-ply toilet paper at the dollar store, but sometimes he'll splurge out and treat himself to things like alcohol. He does this all while meeting his obligations, like his minimum payments and bills. Information from Cousin Al revealed that Chris and Bob had an inheritance from Bob worth tens of thousands of dollars. However, Bob spent all of it hiring Rob Bell to defend herself and Chris from legal charges incurred after the two of them hit Michael Snyder with a car. It should be noted that a state-provided attorney would have been free and yielded by the same result, pleading guilty, which, again, it's when you get arrested is that you have the right to remain silent. Anything you do say may be used in evidence against you. If you attend, if you cannot afford one, a court-appointed attorney will be recommended for you. Yeah, Chris should have done a good job of actually listening to these things for the amount of times he's been arrested. For the case was so cut and dry that even a lawyer of Bell's caliber had no chance of winning it. In November 2014, Chris revealed to Renee and Bob, that Bob was borrowing money from his life insurance. Although in a Kiwi Farms post, in the wake of the bombshell that Chris had been in a sexual relationship with Bob, Noel revealed that Chris nonchalantly stated in their final conversation with each other that he had control of her bank account by then, which allowed him to swipe $750. That said, it's unknown whether or not Bob actually used to exploit his finances before the roles eventually switched at some point. Not to mention, if so, but when. Bank lawsuits currently against Bob. In 2016, two banks, Discovery and Capital One, sued Bob for not paying over $20,000 total in debts, leaving the Chandlers even further in financial turmoil. Bob herself appeared in multiple videos in 2016 to 17 trying to scam people into donating to her. And I suppose, again, we tried to do some of these earlier, but we'll go into them proper. Yeah, this is the one where it looked as though Bob was dead, but no, she was just sleeping.
Hello, this is Christine Chandler coming to you live from home. Anyway, my mom here is in need of medications for her lungs and whatnot. Alright? Yeah. At least say something, let them know you are alive. Well, anyway, it's $100 medication, and she might not be able to make it through the rest of this month, of which we get more money afterwards if you don't donate. So please send your donations that could get to me most direct to my email address through PayPal. Please do it very soon. Help us out here, please. Thank you.
Now, it should be worth noting, ladies and gentlemen, that Chris deleted the video after 5 minutes. But even that was... The trolls, well, those involved managed to save a copy of the video. And by the way, it was then followed by this one, which we did earlier, in which Chris was just sort of only specifying things. And it probably... I'm not going to suggest for 1 second that Chris insisted that Bob looked dead to drive up, but no, because if that's what, they would have just kept the video out there. They wouldn't have deleted it whatsoever. Anyway, here's even Bob now begging people, so...
My name is Barbara Chandler. I presently am in need of financial help to get dental work done. That's expensive. I'm asking for donations towards my dental repairs. Any amount would be helpful. The expense.
Well, that's just like all you need to know. And again, maybe it's just Bob's like nonchalantness and the fact that she just doesn't look like she knows what's going on. And by the way, this is like try to do it as well. And this is like we'll call emergency home update and action.
My name is Barbara Chandler. We are in an emergency situation. Rappahannock is getting ready to cut our service that will stop us from doing anything, cooking, whatever. Please, somebody, buy the Stamp album for $1,000 to help us with.
So, yeah, there's in the first two videos, Bob claimed not to have enough money for asthma medication, and in the third video, she claimed she needed dental work. Something's not quite adding up with these. If Bob actually needed money for an emergency, she could simply have instructed Chris to sell off some of their possessions in the videos. Chris's toys and Bob's hoard are clearly visible behind them. And that's not including Clover or Snoopy, by the way. Now, we are going to cover debt separately, ladies and gentlemen, because that's sort of a part of the financial issue crisis, but don't worry, we'll cover this as well very, very soon. Money-making schemes, wheeling and dealing. Also known as the return fraud in 2010, Chris described buying video games from one store for a lower cost and exchanging it for a higher cost at the store credit at another store. That is like I have to almost applaud Chris for thinking about doing that, but god damn, that's like, wow, Chris, that is out there for him, I must say. The lottery. Chris considers the lottery to be an investment and not a form of gambling, when in reality it is. In September 2010, he told Jackie the following: I invest $4 weekly between Win for Life and Mega Millions, 2 plays each. Cash for Life and Mega Millions currently cost $2 per play as of the 29th of March 2021, meaning that if Chris stopped playing the lottery, he would save around $416 per year. Some might argue all Chris would have to do is win once and then that's it. But, well, that might never happen either. Craigslist. In late October 2011, Chris posted a Craigslist ad for a 12-year-old 32-inch CRT television and expected a non-negotiable $250 for it. In reality, this is about the price of a new flat-screen HD television of that size, and he would be lucky to get a tenth of his asking price. Chris placed 2 cars for sale on Craigslist in September 2014. One was a dilapidated rusty 97 Cadillac with a cracked engine block that hadn't run in over a year, despite having a market value as scrap of approximately $150. You see, Chris demanded $5,000 for the automobile, insisting that the cracked engine block made the car for a great fixer-upper, when in reality, no, it isn't. More like up yours, Chris, if you think anybody's going to be paying for that. Chris also placed his mother's BMW Z3 for sale. The 1993 BMW Z3 is currently listed on the Runaway Craigslist for $10,000 OBO. Keller Blue Book estimates the car with 70,000 miles and in a fair condition is worth $4,318. Chris describes the car as a mint condition Z3 model, like a go-kart with rocket power. Seriously fun to drive, 5-speed and pure joy with the top down. Color is jet black. If I was to make a suggestion, ladies and gentlemen, because I just had to wonder if I could make a joke about that. You know what Chris could have done to actually have made money on his Cadillac? Here's what you do, is that don't sell it as a car, sell it in parts. You want to know what you could do? Take the entire engine out, actually go to, let's say, go to a store, spend $200 on a plane of glass that you would see on a coffee table, turn the engine into a coffee table with just the engine as a centerfold, and put the glass on top and hire somebody to fit it in place, and you've got basically a brand new coffee table right there that you could sell that on again, and you could probably make a small fortune on that, because you know what, take the seats out and actually make them into like proper chairs. Be practical about these things, Chris, because there's actually loads of things you can do with like cars that are worth scrap value. Sell some of the things off as parts, like doors or wing mirrors, and get a little bit more inventive than that. Do something with it, Chris. And rule number 11 of financial responsibility, ladies and gentlemen: there's more than one man's trash is another man's treasure. Tell me I'm wrong. Pawn shops. Chris occasionally visits pawn shops, not those kinds, or similar businesses, among them Snooki's Pawn Shop, GameStop, and Plan 9 Music, to sell his old toys and video games so they could afford new ones. eBay. Chris has long used eBay as a way to sell bits of his toy hoard. He doesn't put much effort into researching prices and often lists the items as vastly inflated prices. In August 2016, he listed a used VHS edition of Aladdin with a buy it now price of $3,000. The reason why Chris did this is that he was under the illusion that the Black Diamond collection was worth thousands of dollars when it probably wasn't. There were no legitimate takers, probably because one can buy the same edition on Amazon for 1 penny plus shipping, but still. It would probably be more expensive to steal a video recorder by that point. In June 2019, Chris's account was restricted, and all of the active listings were removed. 2 reasons for the restriction against Chris are possible. Either his seller approval was abysmal, 84.7% on the 21st of June 2019, or that his PayPal account was in the red. Quickville shopping. From 2014 to 16, Chris sold custom arts and crafts, finally monetizing Sonichu through eBay, Etsy, and Lulu before losing his business due to stress. Kickstarter. On the 23rd of September 2014, Chris opened a Kickstarter project, asking for $5,000 to build the Quickville shopping mall out of Legos. At the end of the campaign, Chris raised just $150 from 27 backers, causing the campaign to fail and Chris never seeing the money. YouTube monetization. Chris has monetized most of the videos which appear on his YouTube channel as another way of profiting from his internet infamy. As further proof of Chris's entitlement issues, Arthur Spatchcock discovered that at one point around March 2016, Chris received $80 and was pissed that he hadn't gotten more. Because Chris wouldn't bother to actually make any videos or do anything to actually garner people, to watch his videos or anything like that, because Chris's reputation is so piss poor that it would have been too much effort to try, like everything else. Rule number 12, ladies and gentlemen, of financial responsibility. If you are not satisfied with how much money you are getting through what you do, well, you know what? Try harder. Do something different. But don't start complaining to people about it, because it's not our responsibility to make sure that Chris is okay. That's Chris's responsibility. But that might be going too much, because again, that's not worth it. This is going to become a pattern. Chris is going to do one of his Let's Plays, followed by an e-begging video, and then polish it off by purchasing some dumb thing he doesn't need in excess of $50. He knows how the system works, and it's the greatest amount of payoff with the least amount of work. The first time when Chris played Destiny, he made $80 from YouTube, and was surprisingly pissed it was that small. Fuck that, I want $80 from YouTube. Then he makes a video whining about how he needs more money, and lo and behold, he gets even more. If anything, people are contributing to his float, and that convinces him that he can get away with being frivolous that much more. Social Blade estimates that of the 12th of December 2019, Chris could earn between $245 and $3,900 per year. But there are many factors such as content ID claims that make it very difficult to estimate the true value of any YouTube channel. That just gives me an idea. So, what we have here, ladies and gentlemen, is Chris's Social Blade, which literally this entire website exists so that if you wanted to see exactly what in theory people do, well, you can see for yourself because, well, take a look at D- is what they give Chris's channel, despite the fact that Chris is a certified user of Social Blade, as it turns out. Go figure. And apparently, this is sort of what things look like. Is that monthly gained views through Quickville Guardian is that this is of August 2021. He had nearly 750,000 in viewers. Then it would drop. He actually gained some by roughly August in 2022. Then he lost, apparently, in September, minus 210,000 viewers. He gained a bit more. He gained nearly 1 million viewers in October. This is like when he was coming back to doing live streaming. Then less. And then he lost nearly 1 million views. I don't know how that happened. I wonder if just some videos he deleted himself or made private, or there must have been some. He must have deleted like quite a lot, and well, even in October 2023, he somehow got to gained like nearly 27,900 subscribers through this, and yeah, how the hell did that happen? I have no idea. So, and then of course, what Social Blade estimates is what you could actually earn is something from like just roughly anything under £6 or stuff like this, or even. No, I mean they're not bad numbers really, to be honest, for what. But then again, Chris could probably have turned all of this around immediately, but as you could probably see, minus that much, you gotta wonder, like, did Chris care, or the fact that just, well, it's a bit late for this. And just in case anybody thinks I was being a bit, like, not selfish, or just try to highlight that it would have been incredibly simple and straightforward for this to sort of turn around, because, well, let's do a little bit of a compare and contrast. What they say about my Social Blade page, it's C+ is what they give it, and what they I only have slightly fewer, a couple more uploads than Chris does. Basically everything like that. 862nd, 596th place on the Social Blade ranking. Only 22.35 on off the way to the top. So, you know what? You got to start somewhere. Now, this is what they would recommend. Again, if my videos were if I actually turn monetization on, which begs the question: should I just turn monetization on? What do you guys think? Do you think that's a good idea? And bear in mind, I only created this new channel like 4 years ago, coming up to, and well, the results sort of look a little bit like this. Is that we went from like 468 views to up to probably this date, nearly 10,000 views in a single day, which means that, to be honest, I'm probably earning double than what Chris would do from YouTube, and the results sort of look a little bit like this. It went from that to this, and this was 14,465 views just at the end of February. And we even gained like an entire 100 subscribers, which you may say it's not that much better compared to Chris, and you're probably right to think so. But I also like to imagine that, well, Chris has got other bigger issues if he can't earn money faster. Because I reckon for someone with Chris's level of experience, oh, who am I kidding? He wouldn't. Experience for someone who doesn't work is a bit of a stretch. Social Blades, or this is going to become a pattern of Chris is doing Let's Plays, followed by e-begging. If any people are contributing to his float boat, then don't. Social Blade estimates that as of the 12th of December 2019, Chris could earn between $245 and $3,900 per year. But there are many factors, such as Content ID claims, that it would make Chris to estimate the true value of any YouTube channel. Though, through things we just explained, There are many things Chris could absolutely do to do this. In fact, he could probably do what I do and actually, talk about Chris. And if Chris saw himself in this light, what do you suppose would come out of that? That it could be the moment of realization that this is the image that unfortunately Chris has. But again, that's not gonna happen either. Let's Plays. In March 2016, Arthur Spatchcock introduced Chris to the idea of doing Let's Plays to boost his online activity and help him gain some money through YouTube's monetization program. The plan fell apart after Let's Plays of Destiny and Uncharted, since by that point, Chris was too lazy to play video games for money and he simply wanted to beg from his audience instead. The YouTube support button. On the 23rd of May 2016, Chris announced the debut of a support button on his YouTube channel to replace the Etsy donation listing, which was forcibly removed due to violating Etsy's terms of service. He apparently got this idea from William Elliott Waterman. PayPal Me. Announced on the 11th of May 2017. Quickville Shopping. I am the original creator of blah blah blah. That's basically what you need to know. Prostitution. On the 19th of June 2016, aka Father's Day, Chris decided to become a prostitute. He has yet to receive any takers. Next, begging. Now this is the big one we want to cover across, ladies and gentlemen, because I know we've been talking a lot about money this week, but along with this and the debt article, you're about to see the ugliest side of Chris that nobody would ever want to see at this point. One of the earliest instances of Chris's e-begging for money was in December of 2009. Chris exhorted his alleged European fanbase to donate $1,000 to remove troll ads from the Wikipedia. That's true, and I covered proof if proof be needed. Chris was making begging videos as far back as 2009. Getcha, head around that one. In 2014, after his house caught fire, Chris again resorted to e-begging for money, placing extra emphasis on "my mother and I really need the money." Despite dropping more than $5,000 on expensive Lego sets to feed his worsening addictions, one would think that Chris would have wised up to the fact that his wanton spending and lack of gainful employment are contributing to his woes. But one glance at the May 2014 Facebook post could easily tell you that he's seeing his situation as an avenue to get stuff from people, the most ridiculous of which being a $300 sea cow on his wish list, which would not benefit anybody but himself in the slightest. In 2016, Chris's e-begging drastically increased, as a result of the Chandlers' stubborn refusal to live within their means. That year saw Chris spend over $1,000 on toys, while both Chris and Bob had court cases resolved which penalized them with steep costs. In addition, Bob joined into the begging, appearing in 3 videos so far. He asked for donations, or at least mentioned them, in many of the posts and videos he made in 2015 through 2016. At first, this was supposedly to fund his production of the Solitude merchandise, but he later shifted to saying that he and Bob needed help with paying the bills and buying groceries. While it's entirely possible that Chris was simply lying to get more money for useless crap, this indicates that the financial hardships, which many people have warned him about, have finally arrived. Only time will tell how his financial situation ultimately plays out, but given his attitude and inaction, the future doesn't seem too bright. Theft. Chris has a history of indulging in 5-finger discounts that he attempts to keep secret from prying eyes. As far back as 2009, if not before, Chris would steal increasingly larger sums of money from his mother's purse for personal use, and use both of his parents' credit cards to finance his gaming addiction, as revealed by the Ivy Q&A. Despite Chris insisting that this behavior was in the past, he would engage in it with apparent reckless abandon regardless, stopping only when forced to after Bob discovered just how much he had purloined. Years later, Chris would rob his mother again, in much darker and far more damning circumstances. On the 30th of July 2021, after Chris was served an emergency protective order temporarily forbidding him from his home, he stole $750 from Bob's bank account. Some of this money was spent immediately. Chris's bank account was $200 in debt. Much of what remained was spent on lodging in a Regency Inn in Richmond, and the leftover money was simply spent on what he could be assumed to be assorted frivolities and food, the only real luxuries he would have before being arrested later that day. 2 days after this money was withdrawn, Noel, who at that point could still view the emails from Chris's bank, posted an image of a low balance notice from Chris's Bank of America account on the Kiwi Farms, confirming that Chris had $1.03 remaining in his account. In a letter he relayed to Noel a couple of months later, he claims to have sent his $150 Patreon payout back to Bob as compensation for stealing the money. If I was Bob, I would have asked for where's the rest of the $600. This is predictably, however, a lie, since not only did Chris's Patreon get shut down very quickly after the leaks were made public, but even if it wasn't, Chris would be forced to wait until next Monday due to their payout waiting period of 1 to 3 business days, something that Chris himself acknowledges in that very same letter. You almost couldn't make this stuff up. In the comics, what the fuck is a C quarter? What the fuck is a W quarter? Nobody explained any of this shit to me. Brendaniel upon discovering Quickville's weird currency. In the Sonichu comics, it is clear that Chris has no idea how money works, both in the real world as well as in Sonichu. Sonichu, Rosechu, Paddy-chan, and most likely all other characters live off welfare, just like Chris in real life. He seems to have no concept of tax, or that it's the Americans populace who pay for his bullshit. Sonichu and Rosechu are living in a 2-story house with an attic offered by the city, and they are paid an average of $3,500 a month just to hang around, and maybe for the occasional city defense or errand. While legislating as mayor of Quickville, he equated 10 years in prison to a US fine of $1,500. He also equated 50 hours of community service to $500 for any sexual violations. In episode 19, it's shown that Quickville actually issues its own currency, in the form of C quarters and W quarters. 10 C quarters make up a W quarter. Don't bother asking about how that makes sense in any way, considering what the word quarter means. Our best guess is that C quarters equate to a normal US quarter or 25 cents, and a W quarter is the equivalent of $2.50. Nor does it explain why fines are levied in US dollars, perhaps to bolster the dictatorship's foreign currencies reserves a la North Korea. This makes even less sense considering Quickville is part of the United States. States, let alone cities, cannot print their own money. Despite holding considerable power within their own affairs, the Constitution expressly forbids anyone else other than the federal government from issuing currency. However, it has been somewhat common for companies and communities and local governments to issue localized currency known as scrip, a Depression-era practice still seen from time to time. Chris, being Chris, and likely reading Goosebumps, instead of paying attention in class, likely is wholly unaware of this information. This was information I learned when I was learning about the Great Depression when I was 14 years old, and Chris knows. Oh, who am I kidding? We all knew this was coming. Moving on. On the Wikipedia article on Sonichu, Chris wrote that Rosechu is usually the one who cooks for her family, but when Sonichu cooks for his wife and kids, we will go as high in proportions as a banquet, even though he only cooks for 5 individuals. This suggests that Sonichu is just as frivolous with his money as his own father. Soup hotels. Chris shows us his complete misunderstanding of the stress his ideas would put on American social security systems if he was left in charge on it of a text called A Sonichu and Rosechu Christmas Story. This is where the idea of soup hotels came from. Even the homeless have a place to stay in the soup kitchen/hotels. Chris with a very bad idea. Chris depicts soup hotels as buildings 10 stories tall with between 10 and 20 rooms per floor, equipped with single bathrooms, beds, lighting, and cable television. Of course, the homeless stay there for free, so instead of building homeless shelters with dormitories, common rooms, and shared TV sets, Chris thinks the homeless should be treated to all the comforts of a bona fide hotel. More like a prison than a hotel, but never mind. This means that, in Quickville, there are around 1,500 homeless people left outside. This might be the result of local industry, choked by heavy taxes needed to pay those social expenses, being unable to make a profit there and thus moving away. In Sonichu Issue 10, Ultra Sonichu and a bevy of Rose Chews stop at a soup hotel. The building is labelled Soup Hotel 17, implying that Quickville has had to open at least 7 new homeless shelters in the span of a month, or they're just bad at numbering things, or more tellingly, that the economy of Quickville is crashing to the ground fast. In fact, I would say the economy is crashing so fast, the economy is now part of the basement of these hotels. In other words, in Mumble Chat number 6, Chris discussed making a TV show called The Chris Chandler Show. One of his demands, not ideas but demands, was the show should not have any commercial breaks, either showing a distinct lack of understanding how a TV station makes money, or perhaps he plans to sell the advertising fees to a single company so that they can play a long ad in the beginning of airtime and leave the rest of the show uninterrupted, a la the season premieres of 24. We cannot know for sure, but he has probably seen at least one show that has done this, and gathered the idea from there. In Mailbag 29, he stated that $10 an hour is a reasonable price to pay for sex with a prostitute. To show his further ignorance of simple economics, Chris proposed a chain of state-run brothels. You are reading this, ladies and gentlemen. You have this. I know. Again, despite the fact that most prostitutes are virtually self-employed and they can list their own prices as much as they want to, as far as from what I imagine this was sort of going, I wouldn't even begin to know where to begin with this. That's just where this shockingly inexpensive fee would not only pay women for sex, pay the salary of a pimp or madam, pay for the STD testing for the prostitutes. What, you mean to say that they will do their stuff? Why on earth? Why should it not be made compulsory to do it with safe sex? But okay, but would also pay for free sex ed classes for virgins. That sounds more like grooming than sex ed classes. In real life, according to Chris, he tried to scam his way out of paying for sex with a Craigslist prostitute who was charging $100 per hour by telling her about the trolls, his life story, and his many personal problems. He said the prostitute then hung up on him. What a surprise. I would have hung up on Chris. Chris also proves us that, in the possibility of being part of a family, he wouldn't be the main purveyor. In the Playing House video, his sweetheart of the moment, Jackie, is portrayed as a successful journalist with high ambitions while he's a stay-at-home dad. Even then, he portrays himself doing hard work like changing diapers and watching over the kids. In this last role, he's so incompetent that he needs to recruit his preschool daughter to watch over his son while he's shopping. This is paralleled by his real-life situation. With Bob gone, one would assume that he'd be the man at the house, and assume some responsibility for once. Unfortunately, as evidenced by his admission in court, Bob is still pulling his ass out of any such concept by paying his court fees. Keep in mind that, by extension, Chris is being minded by an alien woman's retirement money, which was used to bail him out of a mess that he started, while he wastes his own money on meaningless frivolities. Post-jail. On the 27th of March 2023, Chris would be released from jail by court order. In the months that followed, he would be spotted numerous times in Walmart and various other stores purchasing frivolous items. Money obviously had to come from somewhere. If he was able to purchase junk food, crystals, a Nintendo Switch, and even another car. Chris got another car. Chris got another car in this What? He got another car? What? There was speculation as to how... Also, I'm going to assume that they didn't give the Nintendo Switch that was given to Chris back. I mean, I know that if he was being released by court order, I suppose that doesn't mean they have to return his property, but still. There was speculation as to how Chris had the money to begin with. The group home Chris resided at may have given him an allowance for necessities. Money could have come from the Praetor's sales. If the tugboat was suspended, Chris may have reactivated it upon release, albeit with some help on account of his laziness. If the tugboat was not suspended, it may have accumulated during Chris's stay in jail, which could explain how he could afford expensive purchases such as a gaming console and a car. Either way, it seems Chris has not changed and continues his poor money management as he did well before the arrest. It will only be a matter of time before he spends all of his money and will have to resort to begging again. If it wasn't for the fact Chris was doing live streams and people were stupid enough to give him money through donations, Chris would have been screwed a very long time. Like several days after getting, out of jail. And finally, given Chris's long time carefree abandon when it comes to his spending habits, many are actually concerned as to what will happen to Chris when Bob passes on and he has to fend for himself. A past conversation with Clyde Cash revealed that if he doesn't know how the basic expenses that go into running a household and his plan of marrying a sweetheart to dump all of his financial responsibilities on her would never worked out to begin with. Long story short, if Chris doesn't start saving for what future he has now, he won't have one to look forward to, and all he'll have is to blame nobody but himself. Not that he won't try, of course, to blame everybody else, because rule number 13, ladies and gentlemen, of financial responsibility. What you do is your responsibility, not anybody else's. You pay the consequences for the choices you make. And as I've mentioned many times before, ladies and gentlemen, as much as Chris would probably like to deny it, he is responsible for all of this. I have had no influence on Chris wanting to spend his money as he likes. In fact, many millions of people probably haven't either. But Chris sees no value in money, ironically. Money is just a thing that he has to have, like matter or water. But he doesn't actually understand its relevancy, its importance, and all that matters to Chris. Very much like anyone who knows about the bank leaks that DSP had in 2021 when people exposed just how much Phil was spending on in-game microtransactions and everything else. It would be safe to say that Chris's expenses, or just how much he pays, is like, it's just spiraling out of control, because Chris is basically prioritizing himself over his actual taxes and mortgage. Like, does Chris want to go back to jail again? Because, it is possible in that for some people, when they don't actually stick to things like, making sure their payments are on time, they can face prison time for that. I don't think it's that they can face prison time for that, but these things will catch up with Chris again. And as Noel said once again, this guy has not learned a single fucking thing. And I like Noel, I really do, and I couldn't agree with him more about this, because let's again be completely honest. How long do you think it'll be before Chris goes on YouTube again? And again, do you want to just see this one more time before I finish? It's the fact that Chris's views are just sort of like plummeting. He doesn't really seem to be making any money out of what he does on YouTube. Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. But whether or not this is like anything that goes if anything comes out of this, I have absolutely no idea, because I don't trust Chris for 1 second that he's actually going to pull his act together. Although, to be fair, some of these, the views he gets for some videos might be enough to convince him that if he did this, the only way Chris would actually ever be able to, like, make any sort of living anymore, I suppose, is just go through YouTube. If he uploaded daily, if he did the sort of things that I did, like upload daily, have a consistent schedule, and do all that fun stuff, then Chris might stand a chance. But he doesn't, because I don't hold any reason whatsoever that Chris is going to consider any of these. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, rule number 14 of financial responsibility. Rule number 14 of financial responsibility is that anybody can make money. No matter who you are, everybody can make money. There is nothing easier to get than money. But it is also just as easy to give it back again, to throw it away, to waste it, to squander it, to petty it, to lobby it into something unimportant. That's Chris. Chris is the latter. And, well, if he hasn't done anything to prove in his 42 years that anything is different now, well, why on earth are we going to start believing him now? And Chris will be the only one to blame for this. So, I hope all of you guys have learned some very important lessons through all this, and maybe see the idea of money in a very, very different light. And I was going to go into like detail about like when I went on the Prince's Trust and about how it completely gave me a brand new outlook on money in terms of how I'm going to like run my businesses and, you know, all blah 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 blah. But the only things you need to know, ladies and gentlemen, is that it's your money, you keep a hold of it. Don't waste it, and especially not on this guy. You deserve more in life than what you're given. But not Chris, though, because Chris has done nothing but prove time and time again that it's a complete waste of time to, you know, enable his behavior by giving him money. That's the worst thing you can do. And with all that being said and done, take care, and bye-bye for now.